everybody and welcome back to a brand new Doctor Who video. Sorry for the slight delay, but today I am going to be breaking down, discussing all things Once Upon Time. So yes, it was certainly an interesting, exciting episode to discuss, and today I'm going to get into it with all my detailed thoughts, a detailed review of the story. Guys, please do let me know in the comments below what you thought of this episode. I know it's been quite a divisive one, shall we say, so I'm really intrigued to hear what you guys thought of it, what your take on it was, any of your fan theories for the rest of the series, all of that. Please put it in the comments below, and of course, if you're new here, then please do hit that subscribe button. But yes, Once Upon Time. Shall I start at the end of the episode just to confuse the casual viewers? Or maybe that's for another conversation. No, Once Upon Time. So it was certainly an interesting episode. It's an episode that I've watched twice now. I felt I needed a second watch to really be able to give a solid opinion on it. Because sure, it wasn't a story that you could maybe take in 100% on first viewing, because there was a lot on there. It was quite back and forth. You did kind of have to really think about it to try and follow it. But having watched it again, I don't agree with the people saying that it's too complex, that you can't understand it, that you just get lost watching it. I think if you do, and you know, I'm not trying to criticize anybody's intelligence or anything like that. I just think that actually pretty much all the information you need to follow the story is in there. It's just about kind of being willing, I guess, to sit and take all the detail in, because sure, some of the dialogue you really have to listen to kind of get everything that's going on there. But I feel like I've got a pretty good understanding of the story, and hopefully if any of you are a little bit confused about what was going on, I can try and break it down within this video. So I might as well keep it simple and start from the beginning of the episode. I know the episode was itself all over the place, but I'll try and start from there. And so I want to talk about the character of Belle first, played by Thadia Graham, who I thought was absolutely fantastic. Sure, it was a little bit, weird and unexpected when at the start of this episode, after the sort of, little recap, we suddenly throw to this, title card Belle's story, and get this slightly sort of, random, at the time seemingly random little voiceover piece with this new character called Belle running across being chased by dodgy CGI Daleks. I'll come to the CGI later, but, it is what it is. And just seeing her kind of slightly more exploring the post-Flux world or universe that we're in, which I thought was a really good way to initially frame the story. And after War of the Centaurans, which didn't really give us very much impression of kind of the state of the universe post-Flux, it really happened at the end of episode 1. Like, that was when the whole universe was destroyed, mostly, by the Flux. But then episode 2 was very much focused on the Centauran storyline, the Crimean War, and on Earth. In 2021, and then the storyline in the Temple of Atropos. There wasn't really any exploration of what the universe, the state the universe was in now, the kind of mess that it was, because most of it had been destroyed. So it was really, really good, I think, to kind of straight off the bat get that initial impression of that through the character of Belle and through her travels looking for what we ultimately find out to be Vinda. And just throughout this episode, I thought that Thadia's performance was fantastic. Like, I think it's always challenging when you're basically that singular character on your own for all of her scenes that she does, basically, apart from, the little bit with the Cyberman, is on her own or with her little, communication device, or little smart fake, futuristic smartphone that she's talking to. And yet she's so able to kind of sell herself as a character and, really make me want to buy into it. I just thought the actual performance that she pulled off was fantastic from, I think, a fairly young actress. To be able to just, sell all those lines, being able to do that kind of talking to yourself and actually sell it to the audience and it not feel like, a load of fake dialogue that's thrown in there because she needs to be able to say something to give an impression of what's going on. I think the voiceover was a very effective way of doing that as well, sort of alongside those earlier scenes. And I just thought that really, whereas, you may think sort of off the top of it that those kind of scenes with a character we don't know anything about, we don't quite know what's going on in it, you might not be that interested in it and want to get to the more interesting parts of the story with the Doctor and Ruth Doctor and all that stuff. But actually, I felt like the performance of Thadia just just really solved those scenes and made those scenes really engaging and something that I wanted to keep learning more and more about. So I felt that kickstarted the episode really, really well. Sure, it was a bit left field, but then a lot of this series has featured those kind of left field moments, and naturally it's all tying back in towards the end of the story. As we saw, it was all about a sort of a quest to be able to find Vinda, which I think will probably come to a head in the next episode. I'd say the promo picture seems to suggest that might be the case. And as I say, show that post-Flux universe, which I think was very, very important to be able to visually see on screen. But then we get thrown back to the Temple of Atropos, time to almost resolve the cliffhanger of the previous episode, where we see the Doctor throw herself into the place of one of the Mori to sort of absorb all of time, whatever that actually means, that supposedly Swarm was going to cause to happen to Yaz and Vinda. Somehow that's, it wasn't quite clear, but she was able to jump into that, and therefore she absorbed all of that, and she can do it because she's a Time Lord. She's able to, take in all of that energy, and then that presents us. That just set up this fascinating story of exploring different timelines, going back in the past, or the future in some places, of different time streams, of different characters, opening up more backstory, and just giving us loads of fascinating things which I want to kind of break down for us now. So the first and in some ways more simple one that I just want to bosh off was the Dan storyline, Dan Lewis's story, which he had a smaller role in this episode, I think it's fair to say. We obviously get seemingly sent back into his time stream where he's, in a meeting with Diane that we met in the opening episode, talking about a sort of date that she'd been on or something, and then gives us a nice little bit of character development and in backstory and interest into sort of the fact that he almost got married 15 years ago and then got, stood up 2 days before the wedding, which is pretty heckin' rough, and kind of, sets up a backdrop, I think, to what will probably ultimately be some concluding love story between him and Diane at the end of the series, or maybe heartbreak if Diane dies, I don't know. But I just really loved the idea of those scenes where we keep jumping sort of, periods of time that he doesn't even sort of realise, and then, oh wait, suddenly we've cut to hours later and things, because his time stream, he's stuck in his sort of past and it's all a bit messy, and so we're kind of jumping back and forth really, really rapidly. I thought that was really, really clever. And then the way that Diane's then removed from the sort of scenes, and we get, Dan sees a shot of his passenger, or one of the passengers, and then it cuts back to Diane having disappeared. And as much as that was confusing on first watch, obviously then we later understand the reason he's seeing passenger is because Diane ends up inside passenger. So I thought that was quite clever and quite a sort of rewarding second time round viewing. You can kind of connect the dots up and realize, oh, that's why he's seeing passenger, which seemed to make no sense earlier on first viewing. It's because of what was going on with Diane. As part of the Dan sort of section, we also had the what I'm going to coin the random Williamson of the week, where our good friend Williamson turned up in what appeared to be the caves of Liverpool, or the tunnels underneath Liverpool. Don't know the time zone. Don't know much about it, but for some reason Dan was there and Williamson was there, and he was firing a laser gun. Once again, no clue what's going on there. I don't really understand why Dan ended up there. I don't really understand why Williamson was there. I don't really understand anything about what Williamson has to do with the whole of the series. I mean, I'm kind of intrigued, and I'm sure he's going to actually be one of the central characters to whatever the resolution of this series is, because he's being dropped into every episode for seemingly no reason. So I think he's going to be a critical character come the end of the story. But exactly what that is, we really don't know. I love the performance of the actor playing him. I think he's brilliant. I think it's a really captivating performance, and he really sells himself as a character, even if we don't understand what's going on with it. That felt like one of the main moments for me where I'm like, I have no clue what this is about. This makes no sense. I'm sure it will eventually, but it just doesn't yet. And then from there, Dan is kind of just left in Liverpool. We kind of get that bit earlier in the story, and then very much move to focusing on the other aspects of it. And the actual character of Dan is just left there, and that's kind of his bit done. Then from there, we get some interesting stuff with Yaz, where she ends up being back as a police officer alongside, the glitching Jodie, but actually not, other police officer in the police car, and then seeing a weeping angel in the mirror. Before then playing video games with her sister in not their house, and then again seeing a weeping angel, before managing to just about escape that. So that was all really intriguing and fascinating stuff, I thought. I don't quite fully understand yet, maybe you guys can help me down in the comments below, quite why Yaz's kind of timeline, why she was living out events that didn't actually happen to her. Why is she getting all these weeping angels in her timeline, and why was it going that way for her and not the others? Vinder in particular appeared to at least be exactly him reliving the past, whereas Yaz didn't seem to be any of it seemed to be the past. Is it the future? Is it an alternative timeline? Is it foreshadowing her somehow being affected or transported by the weeping angels, or was it just set up for the next episode? I don't know. I was just really, really intrigued by that. I mean, I thought it was very interesting stuff. The creepy nature of playing the video game and the weeping angel turning up in the video game and trying to turn it off, and then having to smash the console to get rid of the weeping angel, although ultimately not at the end of the story. I thought that was great stuff. I really, really enjoyed that. I thought it was a really clever and effective way of doing it. But yeah, I'm not quite sure why all that happened. That maybe was a section that left me a little bit unsure as to exactly what was happening and what the purpose of that was. Then before we get into the main plot of the Doctors, let's just talk about Vinder's section as well. And of course, we got a hint at it previously in the previous episode where he said he'd been, disgraced. The swarm describes Vinder as having been, disgraced, a disgraced captain. He'd, clearly made some mistakes and was trying to seek redemption, basically. And we now learn why that happened. Having done some great stuff, saving a load of people in, as a pilot, sort of in some sort of ship, he saved some people and got a great commendation to kind of be the sort of main bodyguard of the Grand Serpent, who is brilliant. Craig Parkinson is a great actor. I love him in Line of Duty. And he's such just an evil, slimy villain in this episode. And luckily we know we're going to see a lot more of him later in the series. He said on Twitter he will, and he turned up in the cast list for certainly episode 5, I believe, and probably episode 6 as well. He was just a great villain. I loved just the evil nature of him, this scheming, evil feeling, that feeling when Vinder says, it's great, perks for both sides. And just that silence, that turn, that stare he gives towards Vinder, that of pure anger. I love that stuff. I think it's brilliant. I love his performance. I'm so looking forward to seeing more of him. But yeah, it was just great to explore that backstory with Vinder, find out that, him basically taking the moral high ground and trying to, say, what the Grand Serpent is doing is dodgy, got him sacked from his job, ending up being posted on Outpost Rose as a sort of punishment, essentially, or put in a very, very small role. And being stuck there for years and years, or a very long time. We don't know exactly how long. So I do wonder if there's going to be some sort of confrontation between Vinder and the Grand Serpent at some point down the line. I just feel like it's been set up to head that way after what happened between the two of them. And I guess the Grand Serpent might want to try and kill Vinder because of what he did. I don't know if there was ever repercussions that came for the Grand Serpent. I guess we'll find that out in the episodes down the line. But I think it was just helpful for us as an audience to be able to find out a bit more about Vinder's character, to be able to really just have a reason to care about him, because he's kind of been introduced as a de facto companion this series. But in the first 2 episodes, we were kind of asked to relate to him, asked to care about him, without any real reason to, without any real knowledge of who he is. And so I felt this was a really effective way of telling the story of his past, telling us why he's at where he's at, but also without just doing it in a really painful exposition dump of dialogue where he's gone, I got become a bodyguard, I made the wrong decisions, I ended up, being posted somewhere else. He didn't just say it in some long waffly piece of dialogue that would have been really clunky. Through the format of this episode and the structure of this episode, that we were able to relive it in an interesting way for him having to go through it again and seeing the emotion of him having to deal with that again. And then it also helping ultimately progress the plot of the series as well. I thought that was just such an effective way of progressing the story, but also giving us a reason to care about Vinder, which is particularly critical because of then what we find out at the end about Belle being in love with Vinder and looking for Vinder, and the fact they've got a child that's on the way as well. So it just was all those kind of necessary bits of backstory and information that needed to come in for these different characters. I just felt they really flowed into this story, really into this episode really, really effectively, in a way that wasn't boring, that wasn't clunky, but that just really expanded these characters when we really, really needed it. So I felt that just worked so effectively. So that's all the other characters made out of the way. We're like 13 minutes into this video, sorry guys. But now, of course, it's time to talk about the Doctors, because we finally got to see the Ruth Doctor again for the first time in Series 13 of Doctor Who Flux, the first time since we got her brief appearance in The Timeless Children. It was fantastic and exciting to be able to see her back for the first time, even if it was in quite a small role. But again, I love the idea behind this. We've been waiting to find out more about the Doctor's past, the Doctor's backstory, about her days when she was working for the division, what was going on there, what she was like, what sort of missions they had to go on and things. And it's just such a clever way of doing it. We get to explore that. We get to see the Ruth Doctor again, which we've all been waiting for, in a way that serves the narrative, that isn't just Timeless Children, let's have a little flashback with narration from the Master, which I don't hate, but I also don't think is that effective compared to actually giving a way of reliving that story. But obviously for us, living it for the first time and understanding it for the first time, and for the Jodie's Doctor also, it's just such a clever way of doing it. I love the performance from Ruth. You can really, she just always sells herself as the Doctor. I think that Jo Martin just really embodies the character in such a great way. A slightly more, I don't know, sort of harsher Doctor, I guess, than what we see with Jodie's Doctor. A more serious Doctor in some ways, maybe. But I think Jodie is also heading more that way, out of sort of despair, frankly, within this series. And so, yes, giving us this opportunity to explore the division and explore the Ruth Doctor and her companions, one of which was Carvanista. I don't have a clue who Yaz and Dan were supposed to be. It was I don't know, was it notable by its absence of any acknowledgement of the fact we don't know who they are? It's not like the Doctor ever goes, "Oh, who are you guys meant to be?" when she realises who Carvanista is. There's just nothing. There isn't any explanation of it at all. I've seen people theorising, is it Commander Gat from Fugitive of the Jadoon alongside Lee Clayton, who appeared to be Ruth's sort of companion of sorts as well back in the Fugitive of the Jadoon. Maybe it could be those two. Maybe it's two completely unimportant just division members and that's why we didn't see them. Or maybe it's hiding some secret in it. I don't know. It's really, really intriguing. I mean, I love the idea of Carvanista, or at least one of the Lipari being one of those characters as well. And, obviously Dan being the one for it as well was just brilliantly clever. And I just think it's such an effective way of giving us some backstory, but in an interesting way, and exploring that in an interesting way, and putting our current Doctor through that sort of a challenge, that trauma of kind of the desperation of wanting to learn more about her past, getting these little hints, these little moments of it, going through, almost experiencing an adventure from the Ruth Doctor's point of view, but then being yanked out of that at the end of this episode, and not really being able to deal with that fact. I felt it was just really clever how it tied into what was happening in the present day as well, that they were able to sort of use the same solution of having the Mori stored inside Passenger, that the division had, sort of planned for back in the dark times is the implication here. To be able to defeat Swarm and Azure for the first time and imprison them. I mean, I felt it was a little bit cheap that Carvanista was able to just shoot his, I don't even know, laser beam little boxes to be able to capture them and teleport them away. Given they were seemingly these all-powerful beings, the fact they could be stopped that easily by Carvanista's weapon, it's a wonder they haven't been caught again yet, really. I don't know. That was just my perspective. I thought that was a little bit cheap, but probably necessary to service the plot in this scenario. But it was still really clever the way it was all kind of resolved in the division, or the Ruth Doctor version of what happened there. It was really, really clever, I thought. It was interesting to explore and understand exactly what Passenger was. And actually there were 5 passengers, this interesting technology that stores, implication is millions of people from different races all inside one sort of host body that then Swarm and Azure could just destroy in a moment, in a second. That sort of really shows the threat of them. I think that was really, really clever there. It really solved them, but it was also obviously their downfall by the cleverness of the division to be able to substitute one of them into the Mori that would then defeat them and trap them. I thought that was a really clever way of doing it. But there was some interesting dialogue around these scenes with the Ruth Doctor. Well, a lot of it was said towards the Jodie Doctor, but sort of from the Ruth Doctor time, where I think it's whoever's Vinder's supposed to be was saying something along the lines of, this is your last mission for the division. They'll let you go once you've done this. You'll be free reign to do whatever you like once you achieve this. Once we secure the Temple of Atropos, get the Mori in place, then you can go and do whatever you like. And I thought that was interesting, the implication being that this was the Doctor's last mission when she was working for the division. Probably she didn't want to be working for the division by this point, but was forced into it for whatever reason. And then it's interesting as to where this kind of story is set compared to, say, when we saw Ruth in the Fugitive of the Jadoon. I'm assuming that the Fugitive appearance is after this, and when at a point when she's on the run as the Fugitive, presumably because whatever happened after this adventure, that actually the division didn't let her go, even though she knew that was the plan. And so she, went on the run from the division or something, and that's why she's being chased down as a fugitive. Maybe something along those lines is how it all painted together. I don't know whether we'll ever get all that explanation. We'll probably get bits of it, but I don't know how much that will be filled out. But it's just interesting to theorise there. But it's also notable to reference that they reference the Dark Times, saying that seemingly this stuff is set during the Dark Times, which in the Doctor universe is like billions of years earlier, and is a huge amount of time before what we understand to be kind of when the first Doctor was beginning to come into existence. So it kind of, from that point of view, suggests there's a massive time gap between the Ruth Doctor and this adventure and the William Hartnell Doctor, or Young First Doctor, whatever you want to go with it. Which I thought was quite interesting, and I don't know how much of that gap they're going to fill in. I imagine there won't be huge amounts of it. I feel like we'll probably eventually understand the whole mind wipe thing, particularly the fact it was shown in the Brendan scenes in Timeless Children. I feel like it makes sense to build up to that point of the mind wipe, and how the division ultimately dealt with the Doctor is what it seems to be. But exactly how much of that time there is in between there is quite intriguing, given the reference to the Dark Times. Some of the stuff that I will admit was a little bit confusing in this episode was this whole time versus space thing. You can control sort of space. The Flux was a spatial event, but time can't be controlled. The Mori were the division's dirty secret, I think they were talking about as well. it was just a little bit of, you know, techno babble, gobbledygook stuff that I try to wrap my head around, but I don't really understand it quite. You know, the fact that, you know, space can never defeat time, that time can't be controlled, it keeps on running, and all of this. I'm sure there will be some further explanation as to exactly what Swarm is waffling on about there, but I did feel it was rather confusing. And so obviously we say goodbye to the Ruth Doctor, or we don't really get a goodbye moment, but the Ruth Doctor is left, and we leave that division sort of storyline. We get this brief moment off to, I don't know how to describe it. What it looked like to me was the cloisters in Gallifrey, but it probably isn't. It just felt a similar sort of colour palette to and feel to the place, where the Doctor meets this character of Orsoc, who we know nothing about. She seems to be a woman very in the know. She seems to have an understanding of what the Doctor is trying to do at the moment, almost implying that she's in a different universe when she talks about how the Doctor cares so much about that silly little universe, could be implying she's from a different one. And also quite, you know, significantly implying that the flux was for some reason because of the Doctor or to do with the Doctor and something the Doctor has done, which is very interesting, and maybe is another one of these like dark past things during the division days that the Doctor did that were bad, basically, and has actually meant that the flux has had to happen or something. I don't know, is it similar to the whole Series 5, the Alliance had to make the Pandorica to protect the universe from the Doctor, and, you know, that sort of delusional idea that they had in that series. I kind of got that similar sort of idea behind it there, that seemingly the Doctor caused the flux, or the flux was because of the Doctor. It was vague. That's the whole point. She's definitely going to turn up again. I know she's in the cast list for episode 5, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot more explanation down the line. But I thought that was a very, very interesting scene. You always want to hear more. You always want to find out more as an audience, I think. But they gave us just a little hint, a little tidbit as to what could be to come. And of course, then the Doctor gets cut back to present day, or well, to the Temple of Atropos in the normal time. And we see this sort of moment of the Doctor completely losing it, really, and getting very, very angry at Yaz. And, you know, it's amazing that Yaz is still willing to kind of, you know, be nice to the Doctor and go with it when Yaz is constantly trying to be a support, trying to break in and help the Doctor and encourage her, and yet Yaz is always, and the Doctor is always just shutting her down, getting mad at her. I feel at some point Yaz should blow her lid, frankly, and be like, you know, Doctor, you can't treat me like this. Like, this isn't acceptable. We're supposed to be friends. You need to talk to me about stuff. Because it does feel like the Doctor more and more, every time she kind of nearly discovers stuff and then doesn't, she just seems to be falling apart more and more and more as a character, because she just doesn't know her own past. And as much as I think in previous episodes, like the end of the Time as Children, she tried to convince herself that it's okay, that she can deal with the fact she doesn't know who she is, and, you know, it doesn't matter who she is. Actually, it's everything to her at the moment is finding out who she used to be, what happened to her in the past, why did her mind get wiped, what was this all about? And when she gets that opportunity to have it and then loses it, that just, she can't deal with that. And I think that's a really fascinating thing to explore. And I think that that's going to become more and more of a struggle and a theme of the rest of this series. And then that was pretty much it for this episode. We obviously saw Swarm Azure and Passenger teleporting away. They were saying, oh yeah, this is what we always planned for. Something along the lines of basically, although time is kind of repaired because all the Mori are back in place and they hold time together, there is still cracks in there that have been created that are irreparable. Basically, the damage has already been done, was what Swarm said. I don't know quite what that means and quite what that potential is for the rest of the series, but it's certainly, I think there's going to be more problems with time. We obviously saw that the TARDIS also hadn't just magically fixed itself, the door was still on the floor, so I think there's still definitely issues with time there to be dealt with. And then Vinda gets dropped off on his home planet, ready to try and find Belle, because they want to, you know, meet and be together because they're in love and all that. And that was quite a nice moment to see him back on his back at home, and just setting up that storyline that I think is going to become a greater narrative through the rest of the series, a sort of love story almost there. Which kind of starts to make more sense and validation of Chris Chibnall's kind of comments way back in, I think, July, and the Comic-Con stuff about Vinda saying, you know, he'd break your heart or something by the end of the series. So I'm sure that's going to tie into this love plot line in some form. And then obviously we get the Weeping Angel taking over the TARDIS. We can finally say the Angel has the phone box. 14 years after after Blink and that first line was there. Obviously the Doctor says that her last line is the Angel has the TARDIS, which is clearly got to be a reference to that line. Surely it's got to be the case. And I just thought it was brilliant. It's so spooky, scary. Seeing Weeping Angels inside the TARDIS, being able to just take control of the TARDIS was so cool and effective. And I love that. I felt that just set up the next episode so perfectly. And so that kind of wrapped up the episode, really, didn't it? That was Once Upon Time. And I don't know, I just feel like, you know, when I sit here and I talk through the episode and we kind of break down the different sections, I think we can pretty much comprehend all of it. Like, there's stuff with open questions, like the whole what's going on with Williamson, what was going on with Orsock, you know, some of the stuff to do with Yaz and her timeline. That was a bit confusing, you know, and we don't quite have the questions answered there yet. But outside of that, I feel like when you kind of sit and break it down, you really can understand this story. And so I don't think it's one of the most complex Doctor Who stories there's ever been. I mean, go try watching Warrior's Gate and see if you can explain the plot of that to me, because I can't do it. But yes, so I know it's been a divisive episode, but for me, I fundamentally really enjoyed it. I felt it was a really, it was a very different sort of story, very different to what we've seen. I mean, I think all 3 episodes so far have been very, very different, really. Episode 1 was introducing a million plots, not really having much of a singular story in it, but lots of just kind of opening and introductory and mystery to it. Then the second episode had more of a main story to it with this War of the Centaurans and the Centauran plotline. That was kind of the fundamental of the story, with a bit of the arc stuff in Temple of Atropos as well. And then this third episode that's kind of a complete departure of that, where we have these other interweaved sort of strands of a story that's all sort of explored and all kind of comes together by the end of it, giving the different characters their moments, sort of, you know, quite non-linear storytelling with the Bell stuff being put in there as well as the sort of flashback stuff for the companions, and then tying that all up towards the end as well. I just thought it was a really interesting and slightly different way of doing Doctor Who. And I think that's what I'm just loving about this series. Is, you know, sure, the classic standard format of Doctor Who is Monster of the Week. Yeah, let's meet, you know, a new monster each week and, you know, have the Doctor face off against them, turn up on an alien planet, there's an alien threat, let's defeat them, or they're invading Earth, or whatever. And sure, that's great, that's classic Doctor Who. I love it. There's so many great ones of that. But I also love it when Doctor Who does something different, does something a little bit experimental. I mean, this whole series in many ways is an experiment, and even this specific episode is also an experiment. And they don't always work. Sometimes they do. You can look at it even, you know, 2 out of 3 consecutive episodes in Series 9. You had Sleep No More, a complete experiment of found footage, didn't really work. Then you had Heaven Sent, a complete experiment on a, you know, single-hander, worked brilliantly. So I just love it when Doctor Who is, and the people who break it, you know, Chris Chibnall currently, of course, are willing to be ambitious. Because Series 11, in particular, just lacked any ambition. It was so kind of run-of-the-mill, bog-standard Doctor Who. And it's not by any means bad. It's just not brilliant. It's not exciting. It's not pushing the boundaries. Then we started doing a bit more of that in Series 12, taking the bold steps with The Timeless Child, adding in an extra Doctor, you know, just pushing the format that little bit further. And then we're going, you know, a million miles extra this year by utilising the need to do something different because of COVID, by having the series as all one story, exploring different formats, exploring non-linear storytelling, exploring, you know, long-running arcs that run throughout each episode of the series. I love this stuff. I think that Doctor Who thrives on that change, that experimentation, and that's why the show survived for 57 years. Or nearly 58, I should say. But yes, so overall, I really, really enjoyed Once Upon a Time. Is it my favourite episode of the series? I think it might quite possibly be. I think, from my perspective, Doctor Who has just been getting better this series. Once Halloween Apocalypse was a good start, War on Centaurans, a bit more classic Doctor Who with some extra stuff in there, just getting better. And then I think this has just taken it to another level this week by just adding in that complexity, but also that detail, that interest, that slightly experimental style to it that just really engaged me as a viewer more than maybe the first 2 episodes did. And so I'm fabulously excited for what's to come for the rest of the series. I know we've got this really exciting Weeping Angel story to come up next week, Village of the Angels. It's kind of part of the original Series 13 that there was going to be, so I think it will probably be a bit more standalone than certainly Once Upon Time was. But then we've obviously got Survivors of the Flux and The Vanquishers to come to finish off the series as well. And I just think there's so much potential to explore. I think the Ruth Doctor will come back at some point. There's just, at this mid-series point, I think there's still so much to look forward to and so much excitement for the rest of this series. But yeah, guys, that was my thoughts, my detailed thoughts and opinions on this episode. Sorry this video's gone on for ages, but I just really wanted to get out there everything that I thought on this episode. I guess, actually, my one final thought that I should mention was the CGI in this episode and this series, which I think has been a really mixed bag. The Flux stuff looks brilliant. Some of the planets and stuff have looked amazing, but particularly the Time Storm stuff in this episode looked pretty awful. When you had the Doctor kind of floating around with the giant Maury and you had the other characters sort of floating in the Time Storm, they look pretty bad. And, you know, it's not a problem for me. Like, I don't really care. I watch Classic Who, I watch terrible effects in that, and I just look past them. It's not anything that really takes me out of the story or makes any difference. It's just something that I was interested by and noted was how kind of much of a difference in quality of CGI there is. I'm sure some of it's to do with budget, some of it's to do with COVID restrictions, but I just thought that was notable. But yeah, that was my final thoughts. So guys, let me know your thoughts on this divisive episode in the comments below. Whether it's good or bad, I'd love to hear your in-depth thoughts on this episode. But apart from that, guys, please hit that like button, that subscribe button if you are new here, and please do check out lots of my videos if you have been joining recently. Thank you to all new subscribers, because there's been quite a few of them. But apart from that, I will see you again very, very soon for a brand new video. But until then, Goodbye.